Welcome back to Healthy Living for Life. Joining us now is Sergeant Jay Nelson and Trooper Brandon Uhl of the Montana Highway Patrol. Gentlemen, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
So we're going to talk a little bit about older drivers maybe not being as safe as drivers as they used to be. And as we age, we're all different, but we see that decline, maybe in vision, maybe in our reaction time. Can you just start out by talking about why it is so important to be aware of some of those things and realize it might be time to hang up the car keys?
It's very important. I mean, as we get older, as you had mentioned, all of our abilities, our cognitive abilities, our physical abilities, all diminish, whether we like it or not, whether we'll admit it or not. And so we have to be aware that driving is a full-time job. We have to be aware of our surroundings. We have increased speed limits, so vehicles are going faster. We have a lot of motorcycles in Montana, so smaller profile vehicles. So we're always, driving is full time. And so with those diminished abilities, our reaction time slows, our ability to see further slows, and so we have to be careful as those abilities diminish. Our safety diminishes as well.
For sure. And so you mentioned some of those abilities. Are there warning signs people should be on the lookout for, or when do you know that it might be time and you're an unsafe driver? Maybe you could take that one, Trooper Uhl.
Some of the things they can watch for is if they're riding with the person, are they hitting the rumble strip? Are they going over the fog line? Are their reactions slow when they see the red light come up? Does it take them a while to hit the brake? And then just with their health, if they're attending medical appointments with them, if there's something that they're noticing within their health that could be a factor driving, that's something they'll definitely want to watch out for.
Okay, great. And if they see something like that with a loved one or a friend and they bring it up, they have that conversation, and the conversation goes nowhere, do they report the driver, or what do they do there?
Definitely you can report the driver. You can talk to law enforcement. Many times in my career, I've had people stop by and say, could I speak with you? Talk to you about my mom or dad or uncle or aunt, and say, here's the situation. What can we do? And oftentimes we'll sit down, we'll interview them and talk to them because this is a big deal to take that driver's license. That's most of these people's existence, and we have to be very careful of, is it time to take that license or not?
And it's not easy for the families to come forward to talk to us about it because they're taking a big part of their loved one's life away by taking the driving. But they realize the safety aspect of it outweighs them being hurt or killed or doing that to someone else. Right,
and that's most important, is trying to keep everybody safe. And I understand that there are classes specifically for seniors. Would you recommend those? Are those a good idea?
I would highly recommend them.
Okay.
If you look at it, we get 40 hours generally at the age of 15 to get a driver's license. You never get training unless you're in a professional environment like Trooper Uhl or I, ever again. And so 55 Alive is a program sponsored by AARP that can bring people in. I've taught the program many times across the state, and it's like driver's ed all over again. It's such a great refresher to really sort of make people think again of what they need to do when they're behind the wheel.
Okay, great. And have you seen instances where maybe somebody shouldn't be driving anymore, where it got to the point that it was unsafe and they should have given their keys up?
Absolutely. One case that stands out in my mind is the person had diminished physical abilities, but on top of that, they were prescribed some new medications from their doctor. And those medications with their physical ability really diminished their ability to drive safely. And that it could have been bad if I hadn't got them stopped that day.
Mine is a personal one. My grandma drove a giant white Cadillac with the plates that said, "Pardon me." And that was her existence, to drive behind the wheel, until one day she had some eye problems. She was older. She was involved in a crash, and that's what finally stopped it. Luckily, she wasn't seriously injured in that crash, but it took that crash, that possible extreme tragic incident, for her to realize and for the family to step in and say, it's time.
Yeah. And so, Trooper Uhl, maybe I could just go back to what you were saying. So were they swerving, or how did you know to pull them over before it turned into something like a crash?
So we got a citizen complaint on it. They called in the poor driving behavior. I found the vehicle, got behind it, and followed it for a while, and they were weaving within their lane. They went over the center line a few times, and at that point I I made a traffic stop on them and found out that's what was the root cause of all this.
Are there certain conditions where older people should be especially aware that may cause hazards while they're driving?
Absolutely. In this state, I mean, we have 4 distinct seasons here. If you 5 if you want to throw in road construction,
Right.
which is a big thing for an older person to drive through. There's
Yeah.
a lot of traffic cones. I mean, at night, with diminished vision, or if they've even had cataract surgery, the oncoming lights from another vehicle. I've had a lot of people complain that they're so bright because of how sensitive their eyes are from that surgery. Snow, ice, you got to be able to react quickly in an appropriate manner to handle all those.
So I think a lot of us have heard the term a defensive driver. What is that, and should we be one?
We should all be defensive drivers. Like I said, unless you're in a professional capacity, we get 40 hours at the tender age of 15 for the rest of our lives to drive a 2,000 plus pound motor vehicle down the road at whatever speed. And defensive driving is using all your senses, keeping aware of the situation, keeping aware of other traffic, keeping aware of your inside your vehicle. All the distractions we have, from cell phones to GPS, you name it, it's a full-time job. And so driving defensively is using all of our senses and paying attention to the roadway and your vehicle.
Okay. And then we have time for one more question, I think. We talked a little bit with you, Trooper Uhl, about the conditions. What about for those folks who live in more rural areas? Are there conditions that are specific to a rural area versus more urban cities?
For sure. In a lot of the rural areas, the roadway isn't as forgiving as in town or a more urban area. There's no paved shoulders. There's way higher speeds, people entering from their driveway into a 70-mile-an-hour roadway. You got more wildlife out there. There's a lot of things in that rural area that exist that don't in the urban, and a lot of times your reaction time has to be much quicker in the rural areas due to the speed and where you're driving at.
Okay, great. And just final thought, what would you say to folks at home who know a loved one or a friend and is thinking about having that conversation? What's the advice that you would give them from, being authorities in this matter? What would you say?
Although a very hard decision, the outcome could be that you're saving your loved one's life. When you feel as an adult that a family member needs to have those keys taken away, you need to step forward. And we can talk as law enforcement with those people and make the best decision for your family member.
Perfect. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being here today. I appreciate your time, and thanks so much for your dedicated service and your hard work. We appreciate that too. Up next, we'll learn about transportation options for folks who have hung up their keys but still need some wheels. We'll be right back.